So, if it's okay, I just wanted to start by setting the scene, as it were, by giving you kind of a quick overview of the challenges that I personally faced since I was an adolescent. Because what we like to do with, or what I like to do with the interviews is to kind of bring in kind of a personal aspect uh, to these things. So basically OCD and anxiety leading to depression. And one of my first shrinks was a guy who resembled a Scottish version of Oliver Hardy, who would always say something like, here, take some of these pills, they'll fix you up. It was that kind of a thing. And then I had a psychologist who just sat there with a smile on his face and said absolutely nothing, which
Oh,
which
God.
really pissed me off
That pisses
and
me
let
off too.
and led me to believe that he was the one who was wacko. I mean, it was bizarre. So at any rate, Barry, in the documentary on Phil's work, he talks about a very different approach, at least compared to what I experienced,
Mhm.
that he implemented early on during his counseling sessions. So could you please talk a little bit about that as it applies to your own practice? How your practice differs from so-called mainstream psychiatric counseling?
Yeah, sure. Like you, I had sort of early experiences with not very many, but like one or two shrinks who just literally sat there and said nothing, nothing. I remember one session with one guy where he said absolutely nothing until I said something about an ex-girlfriend, and he said, wait. And he turned on a tape recorder. He said, say what you said again. And I said what I said again. And he turned off the tape recorder and he said, okay, resume. And that was literally all I got from him.
Oh my God.
It was horrible. So, and my mother was actually a shrink and kind of in that traditional mode. So
Right.
the first time I saw film, and it was actually over a consultation about a patient of mine, I was blown away by
Mm,
how active he was in the session,
mm,
telling me this and that and explaining dynamics to me and recommending interventions to me, et cetera, et cetera. It was like, oh my God, here's somebody who actually wants to help me and
mm,
is actively engaged in trying to do that. None of it was forceful. None of it was, my way or the highway or anything like that. But it was very comforting to receive the wisdom of an older, wiser person delivered in a very convincing way, to me. So I
mm,
was sold from the first time I met him. I just thought it was remarkable how engaged and how involved. I went to like every seminar that he gave after that. I tried to learn as much as I could. I think I bugged him out of his mind with questions of like, why does this work? Why doesn't that work? Et cetera. Well, what about this? Et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
And gradually over time, we forged a really close friendship. And I just felt from the very beginning that it was a shame that so far this wisdom was only confined to his patients and my patients. And
Mm,
that's why I started the drumbeat for writing these two books and getting them published and getting the information out there. And I think it's a testament to how effective the ideas are that so many people have been attracted to them, and people have literally, like Jonah Hill, literally wanted to make a documentary about it, because he felt so grateful that it had helped him so much.
right. Right. Brilliant. Um,
It's part of an old tradition in psychotherapy, and I don't know. I mean, I think that it started with Freud, where the psychotherapist was really supposed to sit back and simply mirror back to the patient what the patient was feeling.
right.
And that just always struck Phil and me as kind of negligent in a way. Like, here's this person coming to you for help. Why don't you have tools or direct interventions or things that they could try, something, to really help the person?
The other aspect of what I've seen of like you and Phil is, which I haven't really seen before in the psychiatric community, is that you're willing to talk about your own personal vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that, I'm sure for most people, that makes a huge difference because it really brings in the human aspect.
Yes.
Yeah. And
the old theory was that you actually wanted the patient to project onto you, which meant that you should present as blank a screen as possible, and then they would project their cold, domineering father onto you, or their cold, withholding mother onto you, or whatever.
yeah.
And then you would interpret the projection, and through the interpretation, the patient would grow. The problem is, A, that takes forever.
Yeah.
It just takes forever. And B, it really removes the humanness from the relationship. You're sort of deliberately being cold in order to elicit a projection and then interpret the projection. But to me, you haven't really gotten the credibility with the patient to make that interpretation, because I don't feel close to you. I feel wary of you,
Right. Exactly.
So no, Phil and I both feel very strongly that we want patients to feel like we are their strongest ally, that we are the strongest ally for their growth and their progress. And we're going to be in there fighting for it with them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't know, to me, it's a much more humane way to practice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Barry, statistics show that there has been, as you know, a continuous rise in rates of depression and associated mental health issues amongst the general population. And the second leading cause of death among people between 20 and 24 is suicide.
Yeah.
So given the startling numbers, rather than endemic, it appears to be almost pandemic. Do you have any thoughts as to what are some of the prime causes in this regard? Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I don't mind. Part of me wants to point to more sort of local factors like the pandemic, which has increased people's sense of isolation tremendously. But I do think there's a deeper, more long-standing problem in our society of alienation. And I'm talking about alienation in the deepest sense of the word. Even people who have friends on a certain level feel alienated and cut off, and I think largely that has to do with an ethos that's particularly strong in American society, but I think endemic to Western society in general, that how would I describe it? It's essentially that we have to make it on our own, and that there is no real help, out there. That when it comes to the bottom line, you're on your own, kind of thing. So that even people who are connected to their church or their synagogue or, a sports team or something like that, still on a deep level feel like there's no help. There's nothing there. And as long as that ethos remains, you can throw as many social resources as you want at the problem, but people aren't going to take advantage of them because deep down inside they don't believe that they exist. Right.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that question kind of plays into the next one, and it's recently I saw Phil on a webcast with Chaz Palminteri. And he said that everyone wants to be exonerated. And he said, I've got the best girlfriend, the best job, the car. And because I do, I'm exonerated from playing by the rules. And then Chaz asks, Phil, do you think in this regard that the internet has made it worse for people? And Phil says it didn't make it worse; it made it 1,000 times worse.
Yeah.
With regards to the amount of negative, well, actually, Phil used evil interactions that you have within a day. So I'd love to hear your take on the influence of the internet and particularly social media on mental health, as you see it.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. It's, because social media and the internet in general create interactions that are what I would call pseudo interactions. They're real interactions in that the other person is getting your words and you're getting their words, but they're pseudo in the sense that, let me back up for a moment. I believe that there is a kind of spirit, if you want to use that word, an energy flow that exists between human beings. And that energy flow is much harder to generate in a virtual interaction than it is in a real human to human interaction. I mean, interestingly, I feel that energy flow with you, and I do, I think, in most of my sessions, but I notice that it's much harder to generate than when I have somebody in my office sitting across from me and I can read their energy and I can, see, I'm getting all kinds of information about them that I can't really get in a virtual interaction.
Right.
The other thing that the internet does, unfortunately, is that because it's virtual, it allows you to say things that you would never say face to face to a person.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So the level of meanness has just skyrocketed. People can say anything they want.
I'm getting there. But first, the tools remind me of some of the best known Tibetan Buddhist meditation practices where visualization is implemented a lot, particularly Tonglen, along with loving kindness meditation, which was what I call the pre-tools tool that I used a couple of times to help bring me out of a clinical depression. Have you ever implemented meditation and mindfulness or similar practices at any point in your own healing journey?
I haven't. I've never had the patience to meditate, to be honest with you, which is probably just means I could use it more than most.
Well, you got the tools at least.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Barry, on a personal,
I'll tell you, the closest I ever came was that for about a year or two, I got really into yoga. Okay. And I know that's different from meditation, but there was something about the discipline of breathing into every position that I found really calming, really peaceful. Like I could go to a yoga class, and by the end of that class, I didn't even remember what I was worried about before the class.
Right. Yeah. It's very cool. And it's cool that, when I started meditating, it must be over 35 years ago now. Back then, it was still, to a large degree, kind of woo-woo, but now it's like mainstream. The whole meditation, mindfulness thing has really. So that's a good thing. In some ways, I won't get into the other aspect of it, but it's with regards some teachers out there. But there it is.
Yeah.
Barry, once again, on a personal reflection, after a lifetime of depressive episodes, I was finally introduced to my shadow by a dear friend and Jungian analyst who I've been receiving counseling from the past 2 years. I've heard you talk a great deal about the personal shadow on video and in your own book. Please, can you give us your explanation of what the shadow is?
Yeah. Oh boy, the shadow is such an important concept to me. I hate to call it a concept because it's a real being. Right. But the shadow is an alter ego. It's sort of an alter self that lives inside of you. And probably the easiest way to explain how it gets formed is that when you're born, you're tabula rasa. You are a whole sort of human being, and you're not really that aware of your environment, your surroundings, what is approved of and disapproved of. Gradually, as you become more and more aware of what your environment disapproves of, you begin to bifurcate parts of yourself that you know the environment isn't going to like. If in your family sexuality is taboo, the sexual part of you is going to be shadow. If in your family anger is taboo, the angry part of you is going to be in your shadow. And there could be many, many different qualities within a single shadow. They don't have to be in harmony with one another, by the way. So the shadow gets created as the ego begins to bifurcate parts of itself and essentially push them away from the identity. Okay. Now, that creates, how can I say this clearly? That's a sort of a solution to the problem of how do I fit into the family? It's a solution in that sense, but it creates a problem in another sense, which is the shadow isn't particularly happy about being bifurcated and pushed away. And so from time to time, it will take over in a rage attack or in sexual indiscretions or in a lying episode or whatever it is. And then because the ego feels, even more deeply ashamed that happened, it pushes it away even more. So the ego shadow interaction, left to its own devices, becomes basically a war between two selves. Okay. And a big part of shadow work is just literally visualizing the shadow, seeing it, and welcoming it back into the fold. Now, the immediate question is, why would I want to welcome back into the fold a part of me that lies or cheats or is sexually indiscreet or, et cetera, et cetera? You're not welcoming the behaviors. You're welcoming the part of you that wants to engage in those behaviors. And frankly, you're welcoming it so that you can contain its worst impulses. If you don't reintegrate the shadow, you're much more likely to get taken over by the shadow.
Yeah.
One of the best examples of a takeover, it just served my practice perfectly because I could use it as an example, is Will Smith in the Oscars. Here's a guy who has presented himself as a nice guy, a year after year after year. All of a sudden he gets on stage, his evil shadow just says, I'm taking over, and he goes for it.
Wow.
And then he's horrified with himself for having done it. That's the sign of an unintegrated shadow, a shadow that has no other choice than to take over because it hasn't been worked on consciously.
Did you send him your card?
I have a feeling of plenty of cards. Los Angeles, you bump into a therapist around every corner.
Yeah, no doubt. Last weekend, I attended the online seminar with Kristen and yourself.
Oh,
on dealing with Part X. And, even though I've heard both you and Phil elucidate at length about Part X, I'm still not clear on what it is exactly. Is Part X the dark aspect of the ego, or is it something else?
I would call it the dark aspect of the ego.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Part X is it's an inner saboteur. It's probably the best way to say it. Right. It is the part of the personality that, excuse my expression, just wants to fuck you up.
Right.
And it'll do everything that it can to do it. Yeah. Tempt you into sexual indiscretions, get you addicted to alcohol, whatever.
Yeah. Still on that theme, on your seminar, you also brought up the statistic that I think you said 85% of our thoughts are negative.
Yeah.
And my wife and I watched the Brené Brown special on Netflix last night, and she talked about how invariably, when we're sending off our kids off on a trip or on a night out with friends or whatever, our minds often conjure up the worst scenario. And I immediately thought, bingo, that sounds like Part X, which leads me to the following. On the kind of extreme side of this, and this is from a personal perspective as well. I'm just wondering if the anxiety provoking repulsive ruminations and dark thoughts, which, when they're present, are like living in an insidious hell realm and are often tagged as the pure O part of OCD. Would you consider that these are also a function of part X?
100%.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. If it makes you feel really bad,
Yeah.
if it has an insistent quality to it where it feels like you're beset, besieged, in a way, those are the telltale signs of part X.
Mm.
And one of the most successful interventions I've ever made, both with myself, because I have a very active part X, and with my patients, because they have active part X's,
Mhm.
is just simply to label the thing the moment it comes up and push it away from you. Just push it away from you. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're not trying to destroy it, but you're going to push it away from you so that there's breathing room between you and it.
I think you brought that up in the workshop, and it's one of the tools that I told my wife about, and we've both used it since.
Oh, that's great.
And it's been really great. I think if I'm correct, you say like put it out in front of you,
Mhm.
and then I think you said look at it with like a laser beam. So it's almost like dissolving it. Is that right?
Yes, that's sort of a third step. So the first step is labeling it. The second step is pushing it out in front of you. And then the
Right.
third step is, and this is probably going to sound strange to most of your readers, but if you take all of your attention and focus it like a laser beam on part X,
Yeah.
and by the way, it doesn't matter what part X looks like. To me, it's just sort of like a dark cloud, like the cloud that surrounds Pigpen and Peanuts,
Yeah.
You just focus all of your attention on it like a laser beam. What happens is you kind of pin it down, and that's antithetical to part X's nature. It likes to shapeshift. It likes to slip away. It's like I think I said in the webinar, it's like a wrestler who's slathered himself with slippery cream.
Right.
When you focus your attention on it, you pin that down, you stop it from moving. And when you immobilize part X, it loses its power.
Right.
And you'll know that you've done it right if you have like a little bit of a sense of mastery. Like, I didn't get rid of it, but the motherfucker's out there in front of me instead of taking me over completely.
Yeah.
And that's a great feeling for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's as I say, my wife had an issue a couple of days ago that was just like, and I said, I think you should try this tool. And it worked really well for her. The other one I really loved, which I wish I had known a number of years ago, was I think you were talking about if somebody is really coming at you with their anger and ranting at you, imagine an X on their forehead. And
Yeah.
I thought, that's awesome. I had a situation a number of years ago where a friend of mine who was actually my landlord at the time as well, he had anger issues. And one time I came home in the car and he went off on me. Now, initially, this was interesting, and I wondered if I could kind of get your take on maybe what was happening here. I'm sorry, I'm sounds like I'm in therapy here, but it's just I think it's a universal kind of thing. Initially, I kind of was okay, and I kind of said, "Well, I'm really sorry you're feeling like that," and da 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 da. But then, as soon as I went away, I thought, what a fucking asshole. And it ruined my day, the rest of the day. And it took a couple of days for him to come and apologize, but I was just steaming. And I felt really bad that I was feeling that way. So it's like, so dealing with anger in that regard, I guess.
Is it hard for you to get angry in general?
Well, yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was not allowed to get angry.
Yeah.
I wasn't. So but so that,
By the way, that's your shadow.
okay.
Because you were not allowed to means you buried it. And it
Yeah.
means you have an ambivalent relationship with it, which by the way, a lot of people do. This is not just you. I mean, I have a very ambivalent relationship with my anger. I've worked on it a lot,
Yeah.
defining it as the evil shadow and telling it that I want it to be included more in my life. I don't want to take it out on people, but I want to be able to feel what he feels, and I want him to be able to inform my reactions to people. And finally, I'd say that the first time in my life, 15 years ago, I actually began to be able to express anger in a moderate way, not going to the two extremes of either repressing it completely or just losing it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Barry, I think I'm just a couple of years older than you, so we're both from the same generation.
Right.
So I just wanted to get your take on what you feel maybe the greatest challenges presently for young folks when compared to the challenges that we faced when we were growing up. And maybe we've already gone over this, but one thing that I've noticed is the amount of nastiness and hate speech and just general vitriol that one encounters on a daily basis in this society, modern society. And especially in social media, and it appears to be getting worse.
I agree. It's a level of nastiness and malice that seems to have been unleashed, I think, again, particularly by social media and the fact that we're not having person to person conversations. We're talking to a bot or a virtual account or something. And I think the other thing, I'm not sure how to express this, but we grew up in a generation that was marked by a tremendous amount of social unrest and, the war against Vietnam, et cetera. But we had the advantage of having a kind of an idealism underlying it. Like we
Yeah.
felt empowered to change the world.
Mhm.
I don't think kids today grow up with that. I think they grow up with even if they're not aware of it, with an overweening sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And they do not have a sense of this, the sense of agency that sent our generation out on the streets to protest or to, you know, fight for civil rights. They don't have that sense of hope or that sense of
Yeah.
agency. And with that comes a lot of anger and despair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recently wrote an article from my newsletter about this, which I find really interesting because, talking again about the times, I mean, we went through the Cuban Missile Crisis where I don't know about what happened with you, but our principal came and said, okay, we're going to do a little drill now. We're going to go down to the basement and we're going to crouch up against the wall and put our hands over our heads. It was that critical. And then, of course, we had JFK. But then, Barry, we had the Beatles.
Exactly.
And that, for me, being a very placid, reserved kid, was like a spiritual experience.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it was just amazing, and I don't know if the young generation have really had anything that profound. I don't know. Maybe they have, but
Oh, no.
for me, not only for myself, it was for I think our generation. That it was just we had all this negativity, and then we had these guys who were cheeky and they sang and they were great music, and it was just a mind blower.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would expand that. We had the Beatles, we had the Supremes, we had the Rolling Stones,
Yeah.
we
Oh,
had
absolutely. The whole.
Marvin Gaye. I mean,
Yeah.
just unbelievable.
Yeah. I was sorry, just as an aside, I've been watching this series on Fran Lebowitz. I don't know if you've checked that out
No.
on Netflix. And I wasn't familiar with her. She's so funny, but she was saying that for her generation, music, just exactly the people that you were just talking about, is so uh, important for the society.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it was a real unifier. You knew that if you went to another city in the United States and you could go up to a kid your age and they would know your cultural references. They would know your musical references.
yeah. What is cool is some years ago, I was wearing a Doors t-shirt,
Mm.
and a young guy came up to me and he said, "Oh, the Doors, I love them." And I said, "Oh, I saw them live in 1967." And he just about fell over, right? So,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty cool.
Oh, that's amazing.
Uh, anyway, I digress. Barry, I wonder if you could express your thoughts on what appears to be a common belief across the majority of spiritual traditions, and perhaps in some psychotherapeutic practices, that being that the path to personal liberation often requires that you suffer deeply to a point where you feel broken, and yet you manage to prevail. And I I know from my own situation, it took a 3.5 year clinical depression
Mm.
where I wept daily for 2.5 of those years. However, on eventually emerging from that state, I felt almost reborn, and
Mhm.
subsequently felt brave enough to leave a 39-year marriage that had been dysfunctional for a very long time.
Mhm.
It was like the doors of my life were thrown open. And
Mhm.
as soon as I had made that decision to leave, I met a wonderful woman who I've now been very happily married to for 5 years. It's actually our 5th anniversary today.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Thank you. So, at any rate, your thoughts, please, on the beliefs of suffering potentially leading to a form of emancipation.
I'm a huge believer in it. I mean, from time immemorial, human beings have created myths that all have a similar arc, and the arc is we go down into the underworld and it feels like a death. It feels like you're being tortured, like you're being ripped apart, like the worst. And you can't imagine how you're going to recover. But somehow by going down and just keeping on, you somehow come back up again. This is typifies the Greek myths. It typifies the story of Jesus Christ. It's this story of death and resurrection.
Mm.
And you don't have to believe in the myths, but you have to understand that human psychology, those myths are based on something universal in human psychology, which is we know deep down that our hearts have to be broken in order for them to be reborn and to experience them in the fullness that they're actually capable of.
Mm.
So it's a big part of what we try to teach people who are going through suffering, which is don't try to avoid it. Don't try to find around it. Go through it. And there are tools in the book that you held up. There's a tool called the Tower that literally has the 2 steps of death and rebirth.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant.
Because it's a big, big part of human psychology. We could say it's a necessary part of human psychology. And it's the thing that I like about it is that it's not just psychology. It makes human existence heroic. No matter how mundane your existence might seem on the surface, you're an accountant or you're this, or you have a mundane marriage, or you're bummed out about your kid, who's not doing well in school, all these, mundane kinds of things. There's something heroic about the human journey.
Mm.
And you just defined it.
Yeah. Mhm. Thanks for that. Barry, I've heard you say that you're not a religious person, but on the other hand, in your video about the story of the albatross around your neck, you talk about the grace of God in helping you deal with your own demons. Would it be fair to say that while not religious, you were deeply spiritual.
That would be exactly correct.
Right.
Yeah. I was raised by, you have to understand, I was raised by militant atheists. I mean, my parents were militant atheists. My mother taught me how to disprove the existence of God, like how to counter anyone who came to me and said God exists and this is why. She had a way of, and so much so that I literally, I slept over at a friend's house, and I didn't know he was deeply religious, and he started to pray before he went to sleep. And I was respectful. I didn't, make fun of him or anything. But his mom came and said, "Barry, why aren't you praying?" And I said, well, and I didn't want to say anything because she had no idea what she was getting into. I was like a programmed laser beam, to destroy. I started talking about why it was impossible that God existed, that you couldn't possibly prove the existence of God, and et cetera, et cetera. And I was never invited back to that home for the rest of my life.
No doubt.
But I came to it because my use of the tools helped me experience sources of support that don't exist in the material world. It's the only way I have of saying it, which is just another way of saying God.
Sure. Are you familiar with the Diary of a CEO podcast?
No, what is that?
Oh, okay. I only kind of glommed onto it recently. It's a fairly young British guy who is very successful in business, but he runs this this podcast, and he has these different guests on, and they're very interesting. But again, it's all about well, for instance, I just saw one where he had a guy called Professor Steve Peters. Are you familiar with him?
No.
And his take on the psyche? Well, compared to what we refer to in Buddhist meditation as the monkey mind, he talks about what he calls the chimp system, with the other two systems in our psyche being the human system and the computer system. And I'm just wondering if you would consider there be a correlation between the chimp system with Part X. Now, he says that we can only manage the chimp system. We can't control it. And if it wants to get the better of us, it can. So all we can do is keep reinforcing the other systems. Mm-hmm. Now, when he said that, what actually came to mind when I heard this was, wouldn't it just be better to disengage and to implement one of the tools?
Right.
So,
yeah, that's what I believe, is that every tool in one way or another fights against Part X. And you can feel it if you use a tool correctly, that you've been relieved of something. I don't care what you want to call it, some evil spirit or some dark force or some primitive part of you has been defeated. Now, has it been defeated permanently? No, I don't think that that's possible. Mm-hmm. But you can defeat it. And if you can defeat it today, you can defeat it tomorrow. And the more you rack up victories against it, the more confident you get.
Well, yeah, I want to give you my experience with using the tools, because I got this book, your book, back in November, I guess. Oh, by the way, it was really hard to find it.
Oh, really? Oh, what a bummer.
I tried to get it. I tried to get it on our national kind of book thing. And they at first took my order, and then they said, sorry, we can't fulfill the order. Mm-hmm. I had to go to a place called the Book Depository in the UK to get the book.
Oh my God, that's great.
But, no worries. It was great. But what I was going to say is I started using the tools and stuff. And I've been, I'm retired and I'm on a Canada pension, but it's still not a great deal of money. So I've been looking for a part-time gig as a videographer, a video producer, kind of editor for the past 2.5 years. And I've come up with this. However, I did the tools and I got a job.
Oh my God,
There you go.
that's fantastic.
Proof in the pudding. No, I don't, and what the hell? I mean, from my perspective, it changes your energy. I mean, I feel using the tools, I felt a change in my energy. So brilliant.
Yeah.
Barry, the next 2 issues of the magazine, as I mentioned, will be focusing on happiness, followed by sadness. And with regard to the latter, not avoiding sadness, but rather embracing it. So what do each of these words mean to you personally in the context of being human and expressing human emotions?
Happiness and sadness.
Yeah.
To me, those are the sort of telltale signs that you are human. There is no human being alive who's at least emotionally honest with himself who hasn't felt happy at some point and who hasn't felt sad at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at these as emotions that you need to honor by feeling them and then by letting them go, just like all other human emotions. So where human beings get into trouble is when they start to narrate the emotions and describe them and talk about them and why they're feeling this, why they're not feeling that, et cetera, instead of just simply allowing the emotions to wash through them, to do what they're supposed to do to you. And it's one of the reasons why young children actually recover better from emotions than adults do, because they don't have the defenses. They don't think about them. They just feel them intensely and then they let them go, that kind of thing. But that's something we sort of need to aspire to as adults, is to return to that very simple lesson of let the feelings go through you.
Yeah. Yeah, that was definitely something I had a hard time, especially when I was younger.
Yeah.
Anyway, Barry, thank you for the work that you do to help reduce the negativity and suffering in our minds as well as in the external world. In my humble opinion, I think the tools are a fine panacea that humanity really needs right now. And I hope through the article that our readers will discover and put it into practice, yours and Phil's very special teachings. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Your questions were so erudite and clear, and I really appreciate it.